Welcome, everyone. I'm Alfredo Mycue, and I'm the Director of Transformation for the Texas Workforce Commission. And so I want to talk to you a little bit. It's really a case study, but it's also a story. And it's a story about so many of my managers that I'm here proudly to tell you about. It's about managers. I mean, let's call her Wanda today. And it could be a manager that's in charge of open records requests. So that's media that's requesting information from a government agency. It could be something like a career school that's trying to open and needs an application. It could be something like an investigation for like a payday law of a hardworking Texan that didn't get their last paycheck and wants to invoke that law. But those kind of programs, oftentimes with limited resources, fall behind. There's variability. Both special and common cause, and it causes them to go into a negative cycle. So to talk about Wanda and what was going on with her program is she was about 2,600 open records requests behind. It was taking her on the clock days about 37 days, but including delays of mailing and paying checks, etc., for media and other government agencies and law enforcement agencies, it was easily double that in terms of real time. And the law is pretty clear. The law requires that we respond within 10 days, right? So she had clearly fallen behind. And what happened was she did the same thing that John Angus just talked about. She's like, who's not doing their job? We need to work faster. Chain everyone to the oars, right? This is what we need to figure out. Call in IT. We need to bring in and help out. Ring the alarm. We've got to change something and got to work on it. But what happened was her folks became more stressed. She had a higher turnover rate. Folks started to worry about tasks, and they weren't sure they wanted to accept the task if it was going to bring the scorn and criticism of the manager on them, and she fell further and further behind. You can take Wanda and you can replace her with dozens of other managers in the organization. You can replace her with Norma Martinez. You can replace her with plenty of other folks that had a tremendous amount of backlog and that got into the cycle of now where they're spending all their effort answering the phone for people who are complaining. Where's my request? Where's my application? What's going on? How can I get my material? And so much of effort was now being put into tending to angry customers. And then angry customers in public are pretty vocal, and often they call the representatives in the legislatures, or call the governor's office, or call some power broker in their area that they know. And now you're responding to them also. And this negative cycle is becoming greater and greater, and you're falling behind despite your efforts. So nowhere in government in this situation is the theory of constraints and the application more powerful and more effective. And that's really the conclusion that I would like you to draw if you believe these elements and you kind of step with me through our journey and understand the story, is that the power, that theory of constraints, and as the foundation, and how it's been a context for other continuous improvement tools to be utilized in a state agency. So the first thing I want to talk a little bit about is some of one effort in particular that I just read in Governing Magazine, this article about reinventing government, how entrepreneurial spirit is transforming the public sector. And what was interesting to me, and if you've read it or you understand it, it talks about using market forces to enable government. It talks about looking at root cause. It talks about being focused on mission, not just being focused on rules, focused on outputs, not just on inputs, not just on activities like Kristen Cox talked about. And it's a good book, and it made some progress within government, and it was widely read. But their own authors say that it never sparked a revolution, that it didn't fully take hold, and it didn't do what they thought was possible within government. And so I offer the question of why that is. Now, clearly, if you're going to lead one of these revolutions, if you're going to change things on a magnitude like Utah has been able to do, then you have got to have good leadership. I get that. I understand that, right? All of these excellent leaders in their own way leading change. but how do we make it lasting? How do we make sure that it will live on well after the leader is gone? If you remember, Kristen Cox closed that when she had her opening address, and when she said, well, when we get a new governor, when there's a new director of GOMB, is it going to continue? And that's really the question. And I think the answer to that is in the efficacy and the cultural change and transformation that's possible with theory of constraints. Okay? And I really accredit it to one thing, because if there's anything that I've learned in 26 years of working in the government, it's that focus is so elusive. It's so difficult to maintain. It's difficult for managers to maintain. It's difficult for senior leaders to maintain. It's difficult for your own employees to maintain. And because when you don't have focus, then you get the multitasking. When you don't have focus, you can't ensure full kit. When you don't have focus, you don't know where to look in the organization when you start running behind like Wanda did. So focus is an actual critical part of this, and I think it is the difference between these. So when you have folks that focus, are three folks: Governor Herbert, Kristen Cox, and Larry at Texas Workforce Commission. And then you have Jason Turner. He was the director of all of the support services for Giuliani, and he also ran it in Wisconsin. He's highlighted in the book, a recent book by Bob Ben, called The Performance Stat Potential. Then you have Wendy Corsiff-Smith, and she is the Director of Results Washington, and then Governor O'Malley, who implemented a lot of the same things that we saw implemented within New York City in terms of sort of a comp stat for the state of Maryland. But the problem is that when leaders like this are gone, how can things continue to exist? How can things continue to move forward is the question. So here's the agenda for today. We have results, why it works, cultural change, some of the tenets that we've introduced, the applications of the theory of constraints, some of the ones that really take hold in government that I wanted to stress today, people, structure, and participation. Started getting into like how to affect the change, the nuts and bolts, how we pursue government, and the magic of win-win-win in government, okay? And then questions and discussion. One of the things that we've stressed here, and one of the challenges that I've had as a director of business transformation, Larry Temple, who you just saw, he challenged me to transform the culture of the organization. He was not satisfied with results on different projects. He wanted theories of constraint transformation in the way that we approach. And that perplexed me for a while, maybe a couple years. But I really put my mind to it and trained a cadre of 61 other practitioners to be able to do that within the organization. And I want to show you today some of those results and some of the ways that we've been able to affect the change. I talked about this for a moment. There was a law passed, efficiency pilot for Senate Bill 563. Kristen Cox gave testimony, and she mentioned that we needed to have the foundation methodology should be theories of constraints, and that even though the bill specifically mentioned also Lean and Six Sigma, that this could form the basis for the change, and those other elements, those other continuous improvement methodologies could sort of offer the tools as a way to fill in some of the efforts behind improvement at the organization. The pilot was very successful. I'll share the results with you in a moment. Kevin talked a bit about some of the early results yesterday. My office was established, and I was hired, and then worked closely with Kevin initially for the initial leadership element. And then we've led 34, I counted them recently, major improvement initiatives, and with nearly all of them, we'll talk about one, with breakthrough results. And I'm convinced that we have increased the value produced per taxpayer dollar for Texas. The operational capacity has increased with no increased staff. In fact, there's been, where it makes sense and where the managers ask for it, staff reductions. And we've transformed the culture and the performance and effectiveness of the organization. Baja, Kevin, thank you very much. This is the very first project that we took on here. You can see the situation that it was. We were not doing timely, we were not doing quality determinations. It was 194 average wait time. Theory of constraints was applied. You can see the wait time dramatically fell. It stabilized. Here it says 36 days. It's probably a bit more than that because we discovered if we're able to do a determination within a quarter, business doesn't mind. But if you take half a year to do it, it's a tremendous burden to business. And this is for folks that had historical barriers to employment, like veterans that were out of work for a year or more. And this is the interesting thing right here, right? So the cost per determination, and this is actually a flipped over quality throughput over operational expenses. So this has been adjusted for quality. So you don't see that dynamic when you just look at an actual cost per cost, but this has been adjusted for quality. But we dropped it from $3.51 to $1.47. Let's take a look at that implication. So we've done it within the first couple years of time. But look at how much actual more tax credit was put on the street in the critical years of 11 and 12 based upon the change that we occurred. So a tremendous amount of more value actually went out into Texas economy. And this is a QT over OE representation. The difference is, and I'm looking at Rick here who taught me all this. So here's the percent change from the baseline. Remember that aha moment, Rick? So he helped my CFO and I figure how to apply it in Texas. And then you can see the QT over OE, and really what it is, it's the cost per adjusted for quality here, as it is dropped from $3.47 to $1.51. Now what does that really mean, right? So check this out. So one of the things that my boss challenged me to do is he challenged me to come up with a true ROI for government, right? So sometimes very difficult to do, right? And the legislature that introduced this bill called us into the office, right? It was, Kevin, it was shortly after you left, but it wasn't long, right? It was when that session went into session, so it was September timeframe. And they said, show me the money. How much did it work? Where's the money? What's going on? Well, if you know, managers like Wanda, managers like Norma Martinez, the first thing that they put their energy in when you give them extra capacity, when they create extra capacity through application of TOC, is they put it into quality. They start answering the phone. They put it into customer service. They put it into training, right? Am I lying, right? They train, where's John, right? We need to make it sane around here, right? And so they don't actually start turning it into dollars right away. But eventually, when the organization is stabilized, when it's out of distress, then they're able to say, you know what? Anna, she's retiring. I don't know if we need to fill her job because we're doing fine. We have the extra capacity, and I'm also able to handle the seasonal surges that I used to fear so. And so what you see here is you see it now over time. I've been able to capture it over time because of the discipline of managers in our organization tracking QT over OE, quality throughput over operational expenses. So every month, my CFO team produces a number. He takes everything, the lights, the amount of power that it takes to drive your laptop, or the folks that empty out the garbage cans, all of that gets divided up in the agency so that every manager that produces any throughput, any good, any service, any report, any application, whatever, they can take what they produced, multiply it times a quality indicator or a quality calculation, or just take out the bad stuff, and then divide into that number their operational expenses. So that's tremendous data now, right? That's tremendous data. It is, to sort of paraphrase my friend here, Rick, improvement is the area under your trend line. So if I were to go back for a second, here's improvement. And so now we're able to take improvement and to turn it into dollars in government. Now that's pretty cool, and I think a bit revolutionary. Okay, so here we have the same amount of work, almost 300,000 applications, right? And how much were they costing initially? Everybody remember? Okay. And how much did they end up costing? $1.47, okay? So right here, this one right here, the same amount of work of nearly 300,000 was done for 444,000. So half price, okay? So what do we do with that money? Well, the first thing that we tried to do with the money is reinvest it. So let's take the gross savings here, and let's see how much more applications we can accept. Now, the first couple years, there was plenty because there was backlog. But then after the backlog evaporated, well, we were the burner underneath evaporating the backlog. It didn't do it on its own. After that, we still had 362 in net savings. Take away me and the energy of the organization in terms of project cost, and you have, and Kevin Fox and Baja, you're in there, by the way. Okay? And then we get an ROI here. And you know that's only comparing 2 years. That's not talking about all the other years. That's not adding in 2016. Do you all see the benefit of the analysis? And do you see the return? Right? Kind of like a business. Kind of like an ability to make good, intelligent decisions. Do I fill that position or do I not fill that position? What's going to be my return on my investment for Kevin and Baja coming in to assist my organization? We can now report it. Okay? Let's take a look at a few other areas. And by the way, I was well punished after we created that. So now I'm doing the calculation for every single of those 34 projects, right? Because everybody wants to know now what the ROI is now that it's possible. Please, Mike. So that's like the next step that we're trying to do, is to calculate the impact on the economy. And yeah. That's right. I hired 4 people as a business person in Austin. I hired 4 people under that, and I never found out whether or not I got the tax credit. Right. And we can do that in so many areas because we're Texas Workforce Commission. So not only can we do it here, we can also look at the reemployment rate. We can also look at, because every employer pays an unemployment tax under the FUTA Act passed in 1931 by FDR and his team, right? They collect that money. Well, that becomes a huge trust fund. So we can start, now that we can understand the impact of the good work that we do within government and the value per dollar that we have, now that we can actually start to get at that at a granular level, we can start to understand our impact on the economy. You know, and my organization, just because you brought it up, I'm going to brag a little bit, right? So in the Great Recession, we churned out $20 billion of unemployment checks in the state of Texas, actually physically achieving what the economists said that was possible to do when they first passed the FUTA tax and the Social Security tax. So we re-energized the economy. We were part of a great effort, the American Reinvestment and Recovery Act, but the tremendous amount of work that was done at that time. And that was also what forced us to look at this model, and I believe that's what forced Utah to look at the model too, right? Because now your amount of required of you increased to 3 or 4 times. And now what you had to do is you had to be able to take your limited team and your limited resources and meet that incredible demand. Thank you. So here is just, and I'm just going to give you a couple examples of some, go right ahead. A couple examples of some projects that we have. And I'm just going to highlight for you. But everyone's got a set of the slides. There also should be available through TOCICO, and you can take a look at that. But I just wanted to highlight a little bit, and I've asked Rob here in the middle of the room to be my doubting Thomas. So he's your sort of conscience, stumbling over these, trying to decide whether or not I really believe it, right? I've suffered under the yoke and understand that government is not necessarily an efficient and effective mechanism because of all the things that we ask it to do in a democratic society. I understand that. I understand the red tape and everything. So when you're convinced, can you throw in the towel for us? But not until then, okay? Not until then. Well, because when he throws in the towel, I'll move from results to start talking about, so that you could see the change, and then we can ask the question, well, how did we change it? What did we change to be able to affect that, to get those results? But first, I have to win your hearts and minds, okay? So here, on this one, I'm sorry. So it used to take 439 days, on average, to do a major IT project, okay? It's from beginning to end. We had difficulties, no tracking system, many circular touch points, no measures for that. This new system, which we just proved, should take 252 days, and the most recent IT system took 242 days to be able to execute that. Okay? You can see here the crazy labyrinth of appropriations and IT procurement timeline that nobody knows in this room except Kristen Cox and Rick Little. Oh, maybe Greg. And it's crazier in Texas than Utah, I assure you. Okay, what you see here is, this is especially cool because my outlook, my time, my schedule was not remotely damaged by this project. I mean, aside from setting it up, reading the charter, attending maybe a couple meetings and mentoring it, this was done by one of my practitioners, right? And what we did here is we reduced the amount of time that it took in terms of average months to complete an assignment for a tax adjustment. How many folks here in business or understand business that you have? Have everybody? So if you hire somebody else, Kevin, you know that that's unexpected. That's not what you projected when you paid for your unemployment tax. So now you have to do an adjustment. And it has to go on those books, right? So if it's taking almost 6 months in order to do it, that's a terrible inconvenience to business. And so we were able to reduce that by reducing the backlog from 10,000 to 4,900. Now it's just 1 month's of backlog. It's not even really backlog. It's just what we received. And here it's a 52% reduction, right? It was cut in half in 1 year. And again, what's cool about this project is this is sort of second gen. So Alfredo didn't do this, right? A practitioner embraced TOC, embraced these different skill sets and tools, and then did this with his team. One of the wise things that Larry Temple has done is mandated that in every project we have somebody else from a different division that actually participates as either a project manager or a facilitator, a practitioner on that team. And so that's really opened up the eyes of the organization and helped with the cultural transformation. So this one is the Commission Appeals. It looks like and feels like a court. What happens, I've actually done these because I was an employer in Austin, and when somebody leaves your employ and wants to argue that they didn't leave for cause, then they will take you into this sort of court-feeling type environment. It's done in a room that looks like a courtroom, and you can see the average time that it was taking was 54 days. And the expectation of Department of Labor was 40 days. But because in Texas we have protections, sort of safeguards, sort of homestead-like protections, we don't like taking administrative action until a legal action has been completely concluded. And so that has always caused it. So we've never actually met the 40-day labor standard, I think, from when it started. And so it was a big deal for us to finally reach that and then sustain that over time to know that we had that kind of turnaround for Texas. Rob's still unconvinced. It's okay. I'm good. Okay, so here we have fraud determination, and anybody knows that a program size, if left to its own devices, you can lose part of the value of the program to fraud, right? Or inventory loss, or other types of loss dealing with fraud, waste, and abuse. And so we had an old process. We were inconsistent in the different elements, so our call centers were approaching fraud from one perspective, but our investigators were approaching it from another perspective. So there were inconsistencies in the conclusions that were made that oftentimes weren't settled out until they were at commission appeals, which is the slide you just saw before. And some process provided no value at all. Now, I know that's kind of hard to believe, that a major thing, like, for example, the year that we eliminated it, we did almost 900 votes, 854 third votes. So we had somebody that was in the call center that was answering the phone and making the initial type determination that they thought it was fraud. Then it went to our experts, our badge-carrying retired detectives, and they made the determination that it was not fraud. And then we were actually creating a third vote to be able to be done. And I said, well, when we looked at it, nobody in the room, a lot of folks said, that doesn't make sense. I don't know why we did it. Nobody could remember. Not at the commission level. We found the person that had worked at the commission the longest, that was familiar with the process, and he could not recall. He said something about some West Texas DA that asked some questions about it, and we added the third vote just to make sure that it was good to go, right? So we eliminated that. Right? And that was a huge chunk of the amount of work that we did. And this team had fallen behind. You can see here that this, by the way, this is a throughput operating strategy that's down here that we use. We've heard about the maps that Utah uses, and this is what Kevin and Baja taught us to do, where you've got this satellite view of the process that occurs here. And then you see under here is, if you're familiar with law or an attorney, you'll see that the different rules of evidence here, preponderance, clear and convincing, and then beyond a reasonable doubt for prosecution accompanies that. So it really clarifies it for the team, and everybody understands where they are within the process and the expectation of it. Okay? We also cleaned up training, developed a clear document so that the laws, the policies, the precedent within the commission were put in plain language for the entire team. And look at this. That's crazy, right? It was taken 84 days on average, based on an audit. I didn't do the calculation. It was done by our internal audit team, right? And now it takes 4 days, reliably, to be able to accomplish it. Now, this is a little heavy, I will admit, because of the number that we received, because you can see the years there, right? 2009, 2010, so that we had a significant volume. But we were still failing to meet it, right? We hadn't responded to it effectively, and now we can. And I believe that this organization is anti-fragile, is robust enough so that when there would be a tremendous change, they have the metrics. They have the understanding. They're watching closely their blue light and their constraint. They would be, I'm convinced, and I've tried to make sure that the manager has all of the Kanbans, the bells and whistles, so that if we ever start to mount this up again, we'll be your canary in the mine, letting everyone know of what's occurring, and then we'll be able to respond. Whether that's temporary employees, whether that's changing the criteria of what we will attack as potential fraud, we'll be able to respond, unlike what we were able to do prior. Okay, one more. Well, I've got a couple more, Rob. Okay, and so here is this is the Equal Opportunity Office. Okay, we routinely close with a 99% pass rate. We went from 142 days to 92 days. Backlogs eliminated, and we created dashboard to gauge success. But that's not what impresses Texas, right? That's not what impresses Texas. What impresses Texas is that we were using 40% general revenue fund in order to back up a federal program, right? And we were expected to use 25%. That's the expectation based upon the EEO auspices. And we're using 20% and probably less this quarter. Right? So we put what was general revenue back in the coffers. Think more miles of road. Think more services, more care for Texans that need it. Right? And you can see their results here of their turnaround in terms of the amount of cases closed per investigator. Right? And I'm going to take some of the things that John Angus talked about and Mike Hannon and utilize those within the investigator field. I love the lights. Okay, other improvements. Any time now, Rob. The 37. So Rob is our collective kind of doubting Thomas. He did, and he accepted the appointment too. So if he's not convinced that there's improvements, I'm going through all 34. Okay. Here's something everybody knows. Time to hire was 45 business days, so over 2 months, right? And now it's down to 24. I mean, that's our average, right? We improved quality when we did that, and no gains in staff. Career applications, 126 to 86 days and falling. 23 to 52, a reduction in staff reported to the legislature. Major innovations contracts. Now, this one has been a tough one, and but we've reduced it from 312 days to 252, and it's falling. And then backlog in labor law from 2150 down to 80, which meant the five-month wait is down to about a 2-month wait. All right, and the state legislator auditors said we fireproof their agency. What they said is, we got problems and changes and issues just like any other agency. We make mistakes just like any other agency. But because we apply theories of constraint, because we apply continuous improvement, we're continually addressing those. We're continually responding. We're continuing to change. Okay, so one project may not be a success. We had our monitors had 82-day reports, and now it was taking them 82 days to do a report, and now it's taking 116. Oops. Now we did increase. We've received a couple extra programs that the legislature gave us, but we tried to hire some more folks, but they're facing a high degree of turnover, right? But their teams are well trained, and we removed overlap between monitors and technical assistants, and we're collaborating, so we'll see it. We're in a process of ongoing improvement, so still working on that one. But I figured I'd be honest today. Okay, all right, good. Right, even with the reality check. Okay, good. Thank you, Rob. Okay, so there you go. You believe me, right? And just to emphasize here, so we have the orientation. Every employee gets an orientation. About a third, and it's rising, gets an 8-hour course that was actually designed by Baja. And then we have the weekly executive curriculum that I teach every week. I get a certain amount of time to spend with the executives, with the executive director. We have management seminars, almost quarterly, and 61 practitioners that I spoke for, okay? And rapid process improvement, or my office, is the method of choice for change. But here's what it is. This is Wanda. This is what I first started talking about, right? Overwhelmed, now confident. In a data maelstrom, just pouring all kinds of information, and now making informed decisions. Fear of measurement. Oh, big fear of measurement. I'll tell you a story. My first 8 months there on the job, somebody followed me to my car in the parking lot, in the parking garage, and there, it was like 6:30 in the evening, he comes up to me and he goes, "Hey, Alfredo." And I was like, "Yes." And he's like, "You look like a person I can talk to." And I was like, "Good." And I'm fumbling for my key fob, you know, that little red button on it. And he says, I like to think that as I fought my way down MOPAC and I-35 every day for the past 17 years in this organization, that I've created value and done something good for this organization. Not one of those days did anybody measure me. Why are you starting now? But we've turned that into a source of pride. In fact, that individual is actually measuring himself and his team and proudly displays his metrics and his improvement, right? Financial puzzlement now is financial stewardship. Why? Because instead of looking twice a year at the budget, once when it's written and once when I spent too much or spent too little as a manager, now they're looking every month. They're understanding their productivity vis-a-vis their costs every month. We used to be at WIP's whim, work in process, and now we're doing constraints management. We're understanding that process. We used to have our hair on fire, and now it's time to reflect. Now, there's something about being a manager with your hair on fire. I say that I like and I want bored managers that are bored. And why is that? Because managers that are bored think about professional development. Managers that are bored think strategically. They do an annual plan. Managers that are bored think about how to do things better. Their mind's on their next improvement project. Managers that are bored pay attention to what their customers want and what their customers are telling them, right? And so I want managers that aren't totally in the reactive mode every day. I want them to be able to sit back and to reflect. And so what's happened is sort of a paradigm switch in the mind of our managers. Where before, when you had a transformation, when you had a continuous improvement project, it was kind of like because your organization was distressed and we needed to give you some positive attention. Now, it's seen as an opportunity for them to affect the change that they've always wanted, an opportunity for them to get the time to reflect, an opportunity for them to perhaps focus in an area that they've had to neglect, an opportunity for them to build an anti-fragile type organization that can absorb these tremendous surges that we get for sometimes no apparent reason in government without going into that downward negative cycle that I discussed, right? And that's a huge transformation for the organization. This is just a visual. Don't try to understand it or see it. Over here is a throughput operating strategy that all managers are equipped with now. Here's a model of how they digest how they allocate resources to their team to digest that throughput. In John Angus's case, you had the contracts coming in here, and then the creation of requirements and the development, and eventually you had an actual product that came out. All of them are equipped with a dashboard, and yes, Rick, before you ask, they all have QT and OE, or maybe not all, but the ones that have gone through the RPI have, and then we're working on the rest to get them to have QT over OE. And then you hear, when we have to go in, and we have to establish a standard operating procedure, we now do it visually so that everyone has it, and everybody understands, and they understand where they are within the process, and that's the value stream. Foundational methodology. Efforts target constraints in the system, produce rapid and substantial results, and the TOSs invite us to use the thinking processes to be able to resolve those constraints and especially the conflicts. So we use the cloud a lot. To resolve conflicts within the organization. Our strategies are really at the heart, right? The TOSs are what good looks like. We identify bottlenecks and focus on improvement. We gain organizational alignment. Here's my little image of that, right? This is what it looks like sort of before you have a throughput operating strategy, and this is what it looks like after. And then we foster a sense of mission, distinctive competence, which is the essence of the organization, right? The pride that the individuals have in what they do and how they contribute to Texas. And it's important to recognize that this is, a throughput operating strategy is a physical manifestation of the 5 steps, the 5 focusing steps, right? It's a physical, you identify what the constraint is as you lay this out. Then you figure out, okay, how can I amplify this? How can I exploit this to get the most out of it? In this case, is there anybody in here that's never been hired? Okay, so this throughput operating strategy applies to you, right? This is yours. You've been through this. You've been the throughput. And so you can see here the hardest thing and the most difficult thing is to actually cull, because HR is not qualified to do the full cull, or at least they feel in many occasions that they're not, and the manager's overwhelmed and can't do it. This is why we crept up to 54 days, which again is down to 24, in part because of this document. You can see here the goal: hire the best people in the least amount of time. Okay, so this is what we do, just one sort of vision of that. These are the tenets of the TWC RPI. Kevin, look what number 1 is. It's blue light stories right there, right? Think big, grand goals. Larry Temple, my boss, is really, really strong on this. He wants all the managers not to limit themselves to a 3% improvement plan or a 5% to really stretch themselves as much as they can. And he'd prefer to see significant progress along a goal that wasn't reached than meeting a goal that was too low. We realize our hidden capacity, constraint focus, the TOS's focus and align us. We use those thinking tools and best practices. Best practices are huge because we are an organization that has 28 different semi-independent boards that we contract with. And so we're able to take what one board does that's very good and very applicable into another region and use it in a different part of Texas through this. This is kind of the secret sauce right here. People who do the work can improve the work, right? It's kind of radical, okay? In other words, when we do an improvement process, an improvement plan, and we develop a quality circle, we bring in intake staff. We bring in the executive, the assistants to it. We bring in the folks that answer the phone. We bring in the investigators. We bring in the managers too, but we listen to everyone. I have an expression which is, all ideas will be considered, some will be implemented, right? And then we use the methodology and the process in order to roll that forward. There's our dashboards. There's no surprise there for anybody in TOC, QT over OE. So what improvement models and methodologies does TWC use and why? I think you can see here our foundation is the TOC, but we use Lean too, okay? The Six Sigma is more useful when we gather true performance data, but we're gathering more data. We're gathering reasons for late and reasons for defect, and we've reprogrammed several large systems to be able to gather that for us so that we can do root cause analysis and statistical sampling. In government, we gather a lot of data, but they're about like the case. They're about like the individual. We don't gather data like what disappoints the customer, right? So we don't have like warranty returns. We don't have like how many folks, what the cost of quality was after production. We don't have that. So we have to sort of rediscipline ourselves to be able to do that, okay? We're trying to overcome the hurdle of measurement. I told you the story about me in the parking lot there. I made it home that night. Okay, so here's our methodology. It's nothing radical. We gather our sources and our information here, right? We analyze our customer service, our products. We begin the process of benchmarking. We do our stakeholder and communication analysis. We write a problem statement. We write a charter. We analyze the organization using some methodology, in this case, suppliers, inputs, processes, and outputs. We build a throughput operating strategy. And then we identify the constraint. I like to call it the heartbeat of the organization. It pulls in the value and pumps to the next location. So we measure around that. We understand how the constraint should be operating. You said it, John. You said, I know what my pace is. What's the word you used? What your cadence is, right? That is a beautiful word, and that's like a heartbeat, right? How much is it capable of doing before it either gets overwhelmed or underwhelmed, okay? Layer 4 is a synchronization or a gap analysis, right? I had to use synchronization because some manager one time told me that there were no gaps in his organization, and he didn't like that word. And so I said, well, do you agree that they could synchronize better? And he goes, I'll give you that. So I renamed it synchronization. And then we map the future state. This is the creation of the new standard procedure for operating. And then we harvest the impact and the changes. So I think you know the answer to this riddle, right? It's focus that TOC gives us that's so essential in government. And it's the constraint, the heartbeat, the control point, whatever you like to call it. Next steps. So first of all, government improvement is not enough. It's not improved. You have to make sure that it's captured well. And I showed a little bit of that in terms of QT over OE and how we're utilizing that to make the case for government improvement. You would think that if you improve, folks would just run to you and say, that's great, can we have some more of that? But it doesn't necessarily work that way. And we need broader uses of CRT and FRT. Data analysis, we need to be able to understand and analyze it deeper to invite data-driven decisions. We just started an interagency subcommittee. Kristen, you'd be proud of me. So we have now all the agencies meeting together to talk about government improvement once a month. So me and a few other folks within the state of Texas, we started that, and it's just wonderful. And we want to get more agencies on the bandwagon, and then we want to make sure that we continue to improve curriculum and maybe even make it available to other agencies within Texas to broaden the scope that we have. So that is the presentation. How about it's a couple minutes after 12, how about just 2 or 3 questions? Is that okay? If you'd like to talk a little bit about this. What are your questions? Rob, you're a believer? Okay, thank you, sir. So generally, backlog inventory, the way we count it. So yeah, I will. So when you talk about backlog and the reduction of backlog, what counts as backlog, and what is just work that you would normally have done? How do you divide that out? Because it's an important question, right? Because once you admit to backlog, you're basically admitting to the fact that this is the work that I do not have time to do, that I could get full kit on, that I could get all the elements to be able to work, but because my team does not have time to be able to do that, at some point that I'll declare it as backlog. And what I tell them is to declare it backlog once a full cycle has gone through. So once you had a full cycle, an opportunity to grab that, and you've demonstrated it. And that's very different, because some of my cycles are done within a day in the organization. The other ones almost take a year, right? So it's what the team cannot accomplish, and you have to declare it in about the time that you would have normally completed a throughput. Does that make sense? How do you all define it in Utah? Backlog. That's where it's manifest. That's where you get that. Which then takes more of your energy, right, to be able to meet that, right? I mean, I had a manager that this has really happened, is that his investigations fell behind, right? So his complaints went up. And when people, they get angry when they talk to somebody, but they get really angry when they can't talk to somebody. So he took his investigators off of investigating and put them on the phones. What do you think that did to his investigation success rate, right? And what do you think his blue light was? Investigating, right? And he reduced that in order to answer the issue that was caused by the backlog. Amazing. Questions? It really was, and it's one thing, and actually I'm going to talk about it on Tuesday near the end of the day, to put in a plug, but talk about QT over OE as it applies to the organization. And when I really, I mean, Rick had told it to me before, but it hadn't penetrated my cranium, that the calculation, the ROI, the results, the physical representation of the improvement is the area under the trend line. And I just did not understand that. I didn't understand, I mean, you can see it, but because it's QT over OE and it's 3 different factors, it's difficult to appreciate. But once we unlocked it, I hired an MBA, and she helped me sort of unlock that. And once we were able to turn it into that ROI, we even have ROI that's represented even if we don't actually turn it into dollars. If we just turn it into excess capacity, we can measure it, which is interesting. But now when they call up and the representative calls me up and says, show me the money, where's it at, what did you do? Now for every project, we can actually represent that. We actually have an answer of where did that investment go and what did it produce and how is it better for Texas. Has everybody got the riddle that we have? So, when we've applied TQM, we've applied ISO 9000, we've applied all these different paradigms to government, various levels of success, a little improvement here, but when you change leadership, it moves away. But the difference is with TOC is that when you empower the team, all the way from the person that does the work, person that oversight, manages, all the way to the senior person, then they're able to focus on the right things. They're able to effectively spend their time, answer the right questions, make the right decisions in a timely manner. That's just so crucial for government. And once you're able to do that, then they're hooked. They're not going to let go. And that's the way that they want to do business. I don't care who the CEO is, or the executive director or executive commissioner. It doesn't matter, because that's the way they want to do business, and that's what I think is different about this transformation. Thank you, everyone, very much.